Rear end swap. As you can see, it's over there. That's my old one. My new one's over here by Bubba. Alright guys, horseplay's back again. As you can see right there, the rear end is out of the car, the new rear end is in. I didn't film a ton on this as far as the process goes. I'm not really a how-to guy. There's a bunch of how-to stuff, but I am going to give you some tips. One of them is how to make your, if you have the SVE or SVO, whatever you want to call them, the cheaper upper and lower control arms, how to make them semi-solid. So I'm going to show you all that as well as some tips. Alright, as you can see, I got my old rear end. By the way, this is a 308 rear end. So 308 gears to a 373 gears. Man, the difference is phenomenal. And then you can see these bushings up here. They're pretty old and worn. Now, one of the things when you're doing this, one of my tips is swap over your brake stuff if you don't have any brake issues. Because first of all, this rotor is going to be a different thickness than say yours. So say you take the caliper off and the rotor, that if yours comes with rotors and stuff on it, this one came with rotors and the caliper brackets. This caliper slider is seized. That I found that before I put it all together. Also, these was had less wear than mine, but it's not a whole lot. But it's, well, I would have had to screw the piston back in. So I switched out my rotors, my brackets, and everything, so everything would go in easier. That's the first thing I would say to do as far as ease of the process. Now, another thing that my dumb butt didn't realize until I watched the video, you can undo the shock. You can undo the quad shock if you still have it, and raise the car up as high as it'll go. The rear end will actually drop low enough that you can just push down on one side and get the spring in and out. So instead of trying to put the lower control arm, which is like right here, if trying to put it on with the spring and using a jack to compress it, trying to get everything lined up, put your upper and lower control arms, get everything lined up, and then with the shock and the quad shock unbolted, push one side down as far as you can go. I just got my wife to step on one side, and I slid the spring in and then went to the other side and did the same thing. So that makes things a lot easier. I'm sure a lot of y'all know that, but I hadn't ever really dealt with that before. Let's see if we can. It's all nice and pretty. I hope y'all can see all that because I'm not bending my fat butt down there. But the gauge is, the speedometer is about 10 miles per hour off. And this brings me to another part, is I used the New Edge rear end, which is, can't remember how much wider. I want to say it's an inch on both sides, might be half an inch on both sides, but the tires just sit almost flush with the rear now. I love it. I don't have to run spacers. The axle's already wider. For those of you who don't know, a New Edge rear end is a tad bit wider than a SN. These SNs are good upgrades for Fox buddies when they want to go 5-lug. You can put this in. 90% of the stuff bolts up. If you notice when you're looking for control arms, a lot of them say 79 to 04. That's because nothing really changed. So now guys, that's as far as the installation goes and stuff like that. In the middle of my installation, I ran into a little issue and I decided I wanted to make semi solid rear bushings. So I'm going to show y'all how to do that here. Let's see. Alright, so control arm, my bushing is still good, but there's still the bolt is going to be upgraded for the lower control arms for the 99 to 04 rear end, which is what I have. It's a little bit wider, and that bolt hole is bigger. So I needed new sleeves in order for that to pass through. So I got these sleeves, these brass fittings. But what I wanted to show y'all is something that I came up with a while ago. So you get play left and right, depending on driving and stopping. Now I leave the front alone. I leave the rubber bushing up there because I don't want it to rip my torque boxes out. But in the back, I have a washer. This 14mm hole, and it's I think it was 5/8, and it'll fit right in here. Now I can put that in. I can put in the bushing and hammer it in, and then I'll do the same to the other side. I'll put the other washer in on this side right here. Okay, I'll hammer this in, and what it does is these will set up in here perfectly, here and here. So then I slide in the sleeves, and when the bolt goes through, in essence is what it's doing is it's making it a semi-solid rear, because these washers will not allow it to go back and forth. So noticed a lot of the kits, well, I say a lot, I've noticed a lot of kits that have rubber on one side and solid on the other side, and I kind of got this idea to do this if these bushings went bad. And what I was going to do, is put this in here and weld it and make it just a solid arm. But the bushings are still good, and I needed something to hold these in, so I figured just lining up the washers, putting that in, putting the bolt in. We'll see how it goes. I mean, hopefully it's going to be the good enough to where it's, you know, it's strong. I put the bolting through there, and I raked it all around and stuff like that to see if the washer would move. The washer stays solid because it's up against this, and there's a fitting in here for the grease, so it won't go all the way that way. So the bottom won't slip that way, and the top won't slip that way because of the rubber bushing. So it's perfectly straight up and down, and it's plenty thick enough to take the force this way and that way. Now there's going to be two of them to even out the load, so you don't have one side cutting through the bolt, and you have these sleeves that line up perfectly with the hole of the washer. I try to do this with one hand, but it'll line all the way up perfectly like that, so you won't have any issue there. So let me put this together real quick and show y'all what I'm talking about. Alright, now I don't know how well y'all can see that, but there's the two washers lined up perfectly. The inserts are greased and in, and then you can just take these and slide it in, and you can't tell because of the space there, but it lines up perfectly all the way across. So that's the same thickness of the washer that is sticking out. So it's just one continuous thing across, and then it's solid right in the middle. That gives a little bit of room for left and right deflection, very, very, very minimum. And as far as moving horizontal, them washers stop it. So you still have some give up here in the front, so it don't rip out your torque boxes. I do plan on doing that conversion where you box in your torque box and all that stuff. It's just going to be a while. I did have to cut my rear ABS, which is just 2 wires and can easily be wired back in. So I didn't film the taking the rear end out because there's 100 videos. I'm just letting y'all know the issues that I've ran up on. Have a zip tie here because I had to loosen it to get up to this bolt to drop my exhaust, and it kept turning to the side. So we'll get all that taken care of, get the new rear end in, get it bolted up. I didn't undo my e-brake cable. I don't even know how hard it is or anything. What I did is I dropped the rear end enough, slid it one way, brought the cable, I grabbed it and just went around the thing, and then I slid it back this way, did the same to that side. So you can also just turn it at an angle and get them out that way. So I'm fixing to get the other one loaded up on the jack, get it in, and see what I can do about getting it bolted in. Now the other one's out because I just did that modification to that one over there. Gotta get that one in. It's a good time to go ahead and check your bolts up here and everything. Make sure everything's tight. You don't want to forget about any of that. Go ahead and grease them if they're greasable. Do what you got to do while you're here and everything's out of the way. It makes things so much easier. The fuel filter is also very easy to get to up there while everything's out. It's not extremely hard when everything's in, but it's a lot easier when it's out, and you can check everything out while you're here. So I hope this helps somebody. If you have a problem with these control arms with the bushings breaking, I've heard people say they've had a problem with the welds breaking. I have never seen the welds break on these ever. That don't mean they don't happen. I'm just saying I don't make the horsepower to make them break. They might. I don't. But we'll see how this goes, and I'll do a review on the solid setup and see how it's doing in a couple weeks after I do probably a couple hundred launches with my 373 gears. Can't wait for that. Alright guys, hope y'all enjoyed this a little bit. Like I said, I didn't really cover the install. There's so many videos. Maybe I'll even put one in the link down below. But hopefully my tips help out, because had I known this sooner, it would have saved me a lot of frustration. Also, the new Edge uses bigger bolts. I will leave the dimensions in the description. It's a 14 millimeter, and the stock one's like a 12 millimeter. So the new Edge has a lot bigger diameter bolt for the lower control arms. But that being the only part, I had to buy new bolts, and I bought the washers to do the lower control arm bushing trick. So hopefully y'all enjoy this. I appreciate y'all watching. Till next time.
I won't turn around, I done made it this far. Look back now, that wouldn't be too smart. Shoot for the stars even when it gets hard. Put my faith in the Lord with the 16 bars. I won't turn around, I done made it this far. Look back now, that wouldn't be too smart. Shoot for the stars even when it gets hard. Put my faith in the Lord with the 16 bars. I won't turn around, I won't turn around. No matter how far I go, I'll never come